we start to our discussion, let me introduce myself. My name is ERICKA B. GALAPON from BSED 3J. Now we are going to discuss about the Middle English period. The introduction and history of Middle English period. The Middle English period exemplifies a clash of cultures and most importantly language contact. This period sees a new language being formulated, Middle English, for its origin in Germanic, but it becomes increasingly Romantic in its vocabulary for its influence by the Italic language of Latin and Norman, French historical events such as Norman Quest brought French to England, and for almost 200 years, English was only spoken amongst the lower class. The attitude toward it was generally one of disdain, but on occasion, there was cooperation amongst the peoples. Similarly, through history events such as the 100 Years' War and the outbreak of the bubonic plague, English back to a place of stability, regardless of many laws instituted about French versus English. By the end of the 13th century, it was evident that French was losing its hold as the official language of England. The 14th century brought the works of Chaucer and saw English being used in literary works and thus regaining its prominence. Also, when Henry IV gained power, English became the language of King's Court. In the 15th century, the decline in the use of French in England became more pronounced. Not only was it no longer a native language in England, but now there were actually members of the nobility who could not speak French at all. Middle English was a changed language from its predecessor's Old English, but in grammar and vocabulary, it became a highly analytic language and possesses many lexical additions of Romance vocabulary. At its core, however, the language was still English, just a transition that paved a way for the development of early modern and present day of English. The beginning and ending dates of the Middle English period, though somewhat arbitrary, are 2 points in time when ongoing language changes became particularly noticeable, grammatical change about 1100 and pronunciation change about 1500. The term Middle indicates that the period was a transition between Old English, which grammatically very different from the language that followed, and early modern English, which in pronunciation was different from what had come before, but was much the same as our own. The two dates was coincide approximately with some events in English history that had profound effects on the language by Diego 112. Before the Norman conquest, the Anglo-Saxons had a fine literature, both in verse and in prose. They had traditions of scholarship which went back to the 7th century. And when Charlemagne and end of the 8th century wanted to reform his educational system, he imported an Englishman to do it for him. These traditions had been badly disrupted by the Viking invasion, but was a revival under West Saxons' leadership in the second half of the 10th century. The Anglo-Saxons were also fine artists and craftsmen. They produced beautiful caves, crosses, jewels work, and illuminated manuscripts to compare with any in the world. They were also famous for their needlework and celebration. Bay of Staves wreath was probably made in England by Barber Bill and so 145. For at least 3 centuries, there was no single form of English recognized as a normal across most of the country, and people wrote in the language of their own region. Early Middle English texts give impression of a variety of dialects without any common conventions in pronunciation or spelling, and with considerable divergences in grammar and phonology, Barber, Bill, and so on forsakes. It was natural at the first of the new settlers to continue using their own language, for they knew no English. Initially, those who spoke French were of Norman origin, but soon, through intermarriage and association with the ruling class, numerous people of English found it an advantageous to learn French. The distinction between the speakers of each language was not ethnic in its origin, but now largely social. The language of the masses remained English, Bow and Cable 114. The attitude to English was that it was an uncultivated tongue of the socially inferior class. There was, however, respect and cooperation between the peoples. There are accurate intermarriage between Normans and English. The attitude of kings and the upper classes up to 1200 to English was more one in their difference. They did not cultivate the language. Of further activities in England did not necessitate such matters, and their concern was continental, and thus French were more useful. Bow and Cable 117 to 118. 1066 to 1075, William crosses upsprings to Anglo-Saxon earls and peasants with a brutal hand. In the Mercia and Northumberland, uses literal short earth policy, declimating population and laying waste the countryside. Anglo-Saxon earls and freemen deprive of property, many enslaved. William distributes property and titles to Normans and some English, who supported him. Many of English hereditary titles of nobility dates from this period. English became the language of the lower classes, peasants and slaves. Norman French became the language of the court and proper-tied classes. The legal system is redrawn along Norman lines and conducted in French. Churches, monasteries gradually filled with French-speaking functionaries who used French for record-keeping. After a while, the Anglo-Saxon chronological is no longer kept up. Authors write literature in French, not English, for a particular purposes. English is no longer a written language. Bilingualism gradually became more common, especially among those who deal with both upper and lower classes. Growth of London as a commercial center draws many from the countryside, who can fill this socially intermediate role. In 1204, the English kings lost the Duchy of Normandy to French kings. England is now and only home of the Norman English. But in 1205, first books in English appear since the conquest. On 1258, first royal proclamation in use or issued in English since conquest. In 1300s, increasing feelings on the part of even noblemen that they are English, not French. Nobility begin to educate their children in English. French is taught to children as a foreign language rather than used as their medium of instructions. In 1337, start of 100 Years' War between England and France. And in 1362, English became official language of the law courts. More and more authors are writing in English. And in 1380, Chaucer writers the Canterbury Tales in Middle English. The language shows French influence in thousands of French borrowings. The London dialect for the first time begins to recognize as the standards or variety of English taken as the norms or all England. Other dialects are relegated to a less prestigious position. Even those that early served as standards, the Wessex dialects of Southwest in England. In 1474, William Caxton brings a printing press to England from Germany, publishes the first printed book in England, beginning of the long process of standardizations of spelling. Reduction of inflection. Noun. By early Middle English, there are only two ways of showing plurality by S or ES. In adjective, with declensions on longer showed a distinction between the singular and plural. In pronoun, there was more of reliance of the juxtapositions, word order, and the use of prepositions to make a clear relations of words in a sentence. In verb, the laws of gendered syntax or sentence structures. In the Middle English, pronunciation are shown here in our presentation.
Good day everyone. Hello, my name is Kimberly Hilario from BSED 3J. Now, let us proceed to the biographies of the known writer in the Middle English period. Let us know who is Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey Chaucer is the father of English literature and the first great landmark in English literature. Geoffrey Chaucer was called of it because he was the first to write what became generally well-known and recognized poems and stories in the language of the common people of his time, the medieval English. Geoffrey Chaucer was born in 1343 in London, England, and entered the services of the Duchess of Clarence. He served abroad as a soldier and was captured and ransomed, and then entered the royal services. He died on 25th October 1400s in London, England. He died of unknown causes. He seems to have prospered, for a large amount of royal favor came his way. He was buried in what came to be known as the Poets' Corner of Westminster's Abbey, London. The professional of Chaucer are: he is an author, a poet, a philosopher, a diplomat, a bureaucrat, and astrologer. He is married to Philippa Rowett and has children named Elizabeth and Thomas. His parents are John Chaucer and Agnes Copton, or we can call John and Agnes de Copton. The family lived in Thames Street near the Tower of London. John Chaucer was a vintner, and he was a reasonably prosperous middle-class man whose family was been in the wine trade for many generations. He also contributed importantly in the second half of the 14th century to the management of public affairs as a courtier, diplomat, and civil servant. In that career, he was trusted and aided by the three successive kings, Edward III, Richard II, and Henry IV. The representative poet, Chaucer lived in an age which was epoch-making in religious, social, and political planes. The victories of the English army in the continent made Calais an English colony and the nation prosperous. So here, the disasters which came after the victories helped in ripening the English mind. Under these circumstances, Chaucer is the perfect exponent of his age. He was painted with great fidelity, the body and the soul of the society of this time, and his poetry reflects the 14th century not in fragments but in complete whole. He is the most comprehensive soul and takes a full view of the wide and variegated life of his time. Chaucer symbolizes as no other writer does the Middle Ages. He stands in much the same relation to the life of his time as the Pope does to the earlier phases of the 18th century. And then is on to the Victorian era, and his place in the English literature is even more important than theirs. Chaucer is the earliest of the great moderns. He is considered the first poet in Middle Ages. Like Dante, Chaucer is a bridge between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. If the modern world had begun to assert itself, the medieval world had by no means passed away. Side by side they stood, the old and the new. Chaucer represents them both. He is also a romantic and realistic, because he is modern among medieval and medieval among modern, which means he is a child of light, not merely of twilight. Chaucer Realism. Chaucer brings a healthy realism to English poetry. He brought poetry to nature or reality. He was the first poet who revealed the truth about life as he saw it. Before him, the writer was dreaming and weaving allegories. He didn't record the superficial view of the life of his day. His acquaintance with life was wide and comprehensive. Having a Catholic mind, Chaucer painted as he saw it. That his epoch has become a vivid epoch of history, comparable even to the age of Shakespeare. Chaucer was a man of the world, mixing freely with all types of mankind, and he used his opportunities to observe the later peculiarities of human nature. Chaucer's descriptive power. He is the great painter in words. His aim in writing verse, one may say even his sole aim, was poetry for its own sake. He also had no wish to influence his contemporaries, nor to perform morals, and nor to evolve any system of philosophy.
His descriptive power is he had a sharp eye, retentive memory, the judgment to select, and the capacity to expound. Thus, his description is very real and brilliant.
Chaucer as the storyteller. His art of storytelling has been praised by several critics. He has been called as the one of the 3 or 4 great storyteller of the world. He used romance and adventure stories, or chivalry tales, beast fables, stories of saints, and exemplary stories with a moral. He had set before himself an artistic ideal, and knowing how crude were the attempts of his predecessors, he applied himself, his heart, and soul to its fulfillment. Here, whatever type he chooses, he gives his touch of genius to it. He transformed the old tales into something unique and fresh. Let us proceed to Chaucer's humor. Chaucer is an English humor. It is not the wit of Frenchmen. Chaucer's humor is born of a strong common sense and generous sympathy. And these are the qualities of a great English humorist like Shakespeare and Fielding. The work of Chaucer is roughly divided into 3 classes, correspondingly to the 3 periods of his life. First period, or the French period. The second period, or the Italian period. And the third period, or the English period. During the first period, Chaucer translated the Roman de la Rose, a French poem written during the 1200s. He also wrote his Book of the Duchess, an elegiac poem that shared much with contemporary French poetry of the time, but also departed from that poetry in important ways. During the second period, a journey to Italy in 1372 kicked off what is now widely considered to be Chaucer's Italian period, which lasted from 1372 to 1385. The trip introduced him to the works of contemporary Italian writers, such as Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio. At the end of this period, Chaucer wrote his longest poem, Troilus and Cresside, a love poem that he adopted from Boccaccio's Philostrato. From the third period, in this classic of English literature, Chaucer tells the stories of a group of disparate travelers on a journey, often sharp and funny. The Canterbury Tales was more innovative and less formulaic than other contemporary English poetry, such as the work of John Gower. And another work of Geoffrey Chaucer is The Legend of Good Women. It was his dream vision and written in 1380s. This is the final work of fourth of the genre that he composed. Now let us proceed to Thomas Malory, or we can say Sir Thomas Malory. Sir Thomas Malory was an influential and significant author because of his work Le Morte d'Arthur, and he was born in 1405 at Warwickshire, United Kingdom. His father is John Malory, that is married to Philippa Chatwin, and has 2 daughters and 1 son, which is Thomas. Thomas Malory's spouse is Elizabeth Walsh, and together they have 1 child named Robert. His identity remains uncertain, but his name is famous. But according to the internet, he committed so many crimes and he spent time in prison. Let us now know the notorious Thomas Malory. He escapes from Coleshill prison and raided the Cambus Abbey by breaking down the doors, harassing monks, and stealing a great deal of money. Because of this, he was imprisoned in London, and this time, while he is in prison, he wrote the Le Morte d'Arthur, or his famous work, and he died either in 1469 or 1470. Let's proceed to another writer, Pearl Poet. The Pearl Poet, also the Gawain Poet. It is the name given commonly to the presumed single author of 4 Middle English poems uniquely preserved in London British Library MS Cotton Nero AX Article 3. These 4 poems are all written in the same Northwest Midland dialect of Middle English, and they share various formal and thematic features, including the 3 of them are written using the alliterative meter associated with what has been called the alliterative revival, or the 4th, Pearl, is a rhyming poem that employs alliteration throughout. The poem tells the story of the quest of Gawain to find the Knight of the Green Chapel, whom Gawain has beheaded in Arthur's court and from whom he is to receive a return blow, and of Gawain's temptation by the lady of a mysterious castle encountered on the way. Pearl is a dream vision in which the poem's speaker converses with his lost daughter, now in heaven, who exhort him to accept her loss. Glennis, also known as Purity, retellers the biblical stories of the flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Belshazzar's feast, while instructing in spiritual purity. Patience is the shortest poems, and it is a poetic retelling of the book of Jonah.
Good day everyone, I am Janine V. de los Santos from BSED 3J. Our topic is all about the Middle English period, age of chivalry. Earlier, Miss Kimberly Hilario talked about or discussed the bibliographies of the known writers of the Middle English period. So now, let us discuss about the representative writers works, summary of the stories, characters of the stories, and theme of the stories. Let us begin with Pearl Poet. Who is Pearl Poet? The representative work of Pearl Poet is the cleanness, also known as purity. This is a Middle English poem written in the late 14th century. It is also about the virtues of cleanliness of the body and the delights of love when married. It takes the three subjects written on the Bible, if you are familiar of it. It is the flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the fall of Belshazzar, and that was according to my research and own understanding. The summary of the story. For the summary, Pearl Poet's entitled poem, which is the cleanness. Cleanness derives most of its authority from Scripture. The flood and the story of Noah's Ark is from Genesis 5 verse 32, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah from Genesis 19, and Belshazzar is killed in Daniel 5 verse 30. All three major exemplums are therefore based directly in Old Testament episodes. The reader of the poem would already have known these stories. The poem's added value is framing them through the theme of cleanness. Characters of the story. The characters are King Arthur, the Green Knight, Queen Guinevere, Lady Bertilac, Lord Bertilac, and Morgan Le Fay. There are other minor Amelot characters as well as Lord Bertilac's court characters in the poem. Theme of the story. The theme of the story is about physical cleanliness as the one aspect of cleanliness. The meaning of cleanness in the poem extends far beyond that. Cleanness is purity, both of the body, also the value of spiritual purity. In this story, made by Pearl Poet, cleanness, you may notice how valuable being pure is, how cleanliness is important, and the purity as an individual. And the Bible tells us that cleanness is a sample of being spiritual purity, God's will, and what the Lord wants you to be with, or to be on situations where you can obey Him and increase your spiritual purity. Geoffrey Chaucer. Representative work. One of the sample works of Geoffrey Chaucer is the Legend of Good Woman. Summary of the story. His works is about the legend of Good Woman, a poem recounting the stories of women from history and myth who were martyrs to love. Is written in the tradition of medieval love poetry. The Legend of Good Woman, however, he constructed a framework so restrictive as to prevent his being able to infuse it with the richness and subtitle shadings of human existence. Characters of the story. Characters involved in the story is the importance of women to this piece would be the 10 female characters, which are Cleopatra, Thisbe, Dido, Hypsipyle, Medea, Lucrece, Ariadne, Philomela, Phyllis, and Hypermnestra. Theme of the story. The theme of the story is about, as the title suggests, the story praises good women who are known to have remained faithful during their lives. This is also the central theme around which the poem is built on through the examples he provided. The narrator exemplifies the fact that women are superior to men. when it comes to men, and that they let themselves be guided by their emotions more than men do. Women are also more loyal than men. Are in comparison with their male companions, the women are willing to give their life for an idea they believe in. The stories concerning such women of antiquity as Cleopatra, Dido, and Lucrece, and brief and rather mechanical with the betrayal of women by weak men as a regular theme. As a result, the rule becomes more a legend of bad men than of good women. Sir Thomas Malory, best known for his highly influential work of medieval literature, of his representative work Le Morte d'Arthur, regarded as the first novel in English, the first in Western literature, and the most comprehensive treatment of the Arthurian legend. Summary of the story is about Le Morte d'Arthur, that tells the story of King Arthur and his knights at the Round Table. Arthur, who is son of King Uther Pendragon, but was raised by another family, takes his rightful place as king when as a boy he is able to pull the sword called Excalibur from the stone. The characters are King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, Lancelot, Merlin, Mordred, Gawain. Themes in the story. Some of the themes from King Arthur's story are deception, trust, betrayal, and love. Some symbols from King Arthur's legend are the Holy Grail and the Round Table. So, in this story, you may notice betrayal, love, and loss of the Camelot Kingdom because of betraying. A moral lesson from the story is never to betray someone, especially when you are a trusted one. Never love with circumstances.
Miracle play. It is also called Saint's play, and it illustrates a real fictitious account of the life, miracles, or martyrdom of a saint. The genre evolved from liturgical offices developed during the 10th and 11th centuries to enhance the calendar festival. And by the 13th century, they had become vernacularized and filled with ecclesiastical elements. They had been divorced from church services and were reformed at public festivals. Almost all surviving miracle plays concern either the Virgin Mary or Saint Nicholas, the 4th century bishop of Myra in Asia Minor, and both Mary and Nicholas had active cults during the Middle Ages, and belief in the healing powers of saintly relics was widespread. In this climate, miracle plays flourished. Nicholas plays are similar. An example being Jean Baudel's Le Jeu de Saint Nicolas of 1200s, which detailed the deliverance of a crusader and conversion of a Saracen king. Few English miracle plays are extant because they were banned by Henry VIII in the mid-16th century, and most were subsequently destroyed or lost. And that is the three plays in medieval ages or English period. Let's have the mystery play. So what is mystery play? A mystery play is where the stories are taken from the Bible, and every play has 4 to 5 different scenes. Here, the actors are the priests and monks. They conducted every scene in the different places in town, and people moved from one stage to the next to watch the play. The play usually finished outside the church so that the people would go to church and hear a lecture after seeing the play. During the 13th century, various guilds began producing the plays in the vernacular at sites removed from the churches. Under these conditions, the strictly religious nature of the plays declined, and they became filled with irrelevancies and apocryphal elements. Furthermore, satirical elements were introduced to mock positions, soldiers, judges, and even monks and priests. In England, over decades, groups of 25 to 50 plays were organized into lengthy cycles, such as the Chester plays and the Wakefield plays, while in France, a single play, The Act of the Apostles by Amol and Simon Graban, contained 494 speaking parts and 61,908 lines of rhymed verse. It took 40 days to perform, and they died out in many areas with the Reformation. Next play is Morality play. It is also called Morality. Morality is an allegorical drama that is popular in Europe, especially during the 15th and 16th centuries, in which the characters personify moral qualities such as charity or vice, or abstractions. Abstraction is death or youth, and in which moral lessons are taught. The purpose of this play is to try to teach through a theoretical point of view. So the elements of morality play is, it is play typically contain a protagonist who represent humanity as a whole. And the theme of the morality play is, it is the conflict between the forces of good, the good angel, the virtues, and the forces of evil, which is the bad angel or devil or the vices. For profession of man's soul. In all the morality play, the everyman is still performed and it is considered as one of the greatest. An English morality play of the 15th century, probably a version of a Dutch play, Elcherlijk. It achieves a beautiful, simple solemnity in treating allegorically, and the theme of death and the fate of the human soul, of every man's soul, as he tries to justify his time on earth.
Metrical Romances. In metrical romance, it is a type of narrative poem that deals with the story of adventure, love, chivalry, and deeds of daring do. It is also called chivalric poems. They quite often contain an element of mystery and the supernatural, a popular form of entertainment from Middle Ages until 19th century, when the prose romance already established in previous century gradually superseded it. Metrical romances do not need to have a consistent rhyme or meter, although some do. The famous example of metrical romance include The Lady of the Lake on 1810. The Lady in the Lake is a detective novel published in 1943 by the American author Raymond Chandler. It features Chandler's trademark character Philip Marlowe, the Los Angeles-based private investigator, played by Humphrey Bogart in the 1946 film The Big Sleep, and Elliot Loud in 1973's The Long Goodbye. In The Lady in the Lake, Marlowe investigates the disappearance of a woman in a small mountain village outside Los Angeles, California. Marlowe is approached in his office by a wealthy business tycoon named Therese Kingsley. Kingsley and his wife, Crystals, had been separated and estranged for some time. But 2 weeks ago, she finally sent a telegram to Kingsley asking for a divorce so that she could marry her new boyfriend, a gigalio named Chris Lavery. Unable to reach Crystals, Kingsley faced Lavery a visit, but Lavery claims to have no knowledge of her whereabouts. After taking the case, Marlowe's first stop is the Lavery's, where he suspects Crystals may be hiding out despite Lavery's claim of ignorance. While staking out Lavery's house in the nearby town of Bay City, a local scumbag cop named Aldergarmo threatens Marlowe and asks him to leave. Dergamo mistakenly believes that the house Marlowe is watching is the one next door belonging to Dr. Almoray. Dr. Almoray's wife, Marlowe, learns died a suspicious death, and some believe that the wealthy doctor bribed the local police to look the other way. In any case, Marlowe doesn't need a hit he's getting from Dergano and temporarily shifts his investigation to Little Foam Lake, where Kingsley owns a cabin. There, Marlowe meets the caretaker, Bill Chess, who is expecting him while Marlowe and Chess walk the grounds. A visible distraught Chess explained that his wife, Marshall, left him around the same time of Crystal's disappearance while rounding the lake. The two discover a bloated, decomposed, and waterlogged dead human that's washed ashore. While the deposition and water damage has made the human's face unrecognizable, the clothes and jewelry identify her as Muriel. The police arrest Chess, though Marlowe isn't so sure that Chess is the killer, but it's not his case. So Marlowe returns to Los Angeles on the way. However, he decides to drop on a few hotels, hoping to catch a lucky break that maybe somebody saw Crystal lately. In fact, multiple employees say that saw a human matching Crystal's description. What's more, they say she was accompanied by a man matching Chris Lavery's description. When he returns to Lavery's home, he finds the man murdered in his own bathroom. Meanwhile, the gun he is believed to be murdered with is found on the stairs by owner of the house, a woman named Mrs. Folborg. Reluctant and get involved in Lavery's murder, particularly in a town full of low-key, corrupt cops like Dergano. Marlowe lives to find Kingsley, who offers him a bonus if he is able to prove Crystal's innocence. Marlowe accepts and returns to Lavery's house, where he finally calls the cops and reports the murder. When Marlowe returns to his office, he finds a note from Kingsley with the names and phone number of the parents of Dr. Almore's murdered wife. The parents tell him they believe Dr. Almore drugged his wife, then made her death off like a suicide. Meanwhile, they say that the detective they hired has been arrested for drunk driving. He also learns from the parents that Dr. Almore had a nurse working for him named Mildred Haviland. who is also the ex-wife of Dergarmo. When Marlowe tries to track down the detective hired by the parents, he too arrested by Bay City cops who force him to drink liquor before arresting him for drunk driving. Fortunately, Marlowe is able to talk his way out of the situation and leave the police station. Back at his office, Marlowe gets words that Crystal has finally contacted Kingsley, saying she needs $500. Marlowe agrees to deliver the money, if only to confront the human about whether or not she killed Lavery. Marlowe arrives at the apartment in Bay City, where she pulls a gun on him. Marlowe accuses her in killing Lavery, but before he can get an answer, Marlowe is hit from behind with the feels like a police baton. When he walks up, he has gin poured over him. Marlowe realizes he's in the bed in the apartment. He looks over and sees Crystal's dead body, beaten, blood-dyed, and strangled. Correctly surmising that he's being set off the corrupt Bay City police, Marlowe tracks down Dergarmo and convinces the venal, greedy police officer that they can pull a much more believable and lucrative frame-up jobs by pinning the murder on Kingsley. Marlowe needs only to go to Kingsley's cabin and Big Phone Lake to collect same fake evidence. Dergarmo agrees, but once the two are at the cabin, Marlowe lays out the truth of what happened. The body Marlowe woke up next to was not Crystal's, it was Mildred Haviland's. Her ex-husband Dergarmo killed her, and assuming Crystal's would never be found and identified, pretended she was Crystal's. Meanwhile, the body of the lady in the lake did not belong to Muriel but Crystal, who was killed by Mildred Haviland, who wanted to impersonate Crystal so she could avoid being charged with murder of Dr. Almare's wife, for which she was responsible. Mildred also killed Lavery. Marlowe says, though a bit convoluted in the end, the lady in the lake is full of enjoyable twists and turns of great dialogue. That's the summary of the story. In religious dramas, liturgical drama or religious drama, in its various Christian contexts, originates from Mass itself and usually present a relatively complex ritual that includes theatrical elements. In Christian tradition, religious drama is stemmed out of liturgy at the end of the Middle Ages, most at the 15th century. In the form of mystery plays, the first French drama offered by the 12th century is called Adam and was written by Anglo-Norman author whose name is unknown. The subject extends from the fall in the terrestrial paradise to the time of the prophets who foretell the Redeemer, relating in passing the history of Cain and Abel. It is written in French, though the direction to the actors are in Latin. It was played before the gate of the church. And the story of the Adam, or the written of Adam was shown here in our presentation.